Admiral Zethkari had seen many things in his 3 centuries of service to the Galactic Council. He had witnessed the birth of stars, the collapse of civilizations, and the delicate dance of diplomacy that kept 1,000 worlds from tearing each other apart. But nothing had prepared him for the readings his sensors were showing him now. "Sir, the gravitational distortions are unlike anything in our databases," reported his science officer, her crystalline voice trembling with what might have been fear or excitement. The Velnari were known for their emotional control, so any display of feeling was significant. The bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Vigilance hummed with nervous energy. Officers from a dozen different species worked at their stations, but all eyes kept drifting to the main display. The space before them looked empty to the naked eye, but the sensors told a different story. Reality itself was bending, twisting into impossible shapes as something massive prepared to emerge from hyperspace. Distance to the anomaly. Zethkari asked, his forearms clasped behind his back in the traditional pose of a Thrakari commander. "Approximately 50,000 kilometers in closing, Admiral," came the reply from the navigation officer. "Whatever it is, it's big, really big." The Admiral's mandibles clicked together in thought. His fleet of 12 ships represented the finest military technology the Galactic Council could produce. Each vessel was over 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack planets and shields that had never failed in battle. They were here to investigate reports of an unknown species that had somehow bypassed all their sensor networks and appeared in Council space without warning. The reports had been fragmentary at first, mining stations going silent, trading posts reporting strange ships that didn't match any known configuration. Then came the more disturbing news. Entire fleets of the aggressive Korthak Empire had simply vanished while investigating these newcomers. The Korthak were brutal but effective warriors. For them to disappear without sending so much as a distress signal was unthinkable. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy buildups," the weapons officer called out. "Whatever's coming through is heavily armed." Zethkari nodded grimly. The Council had hoped for peaceful contact, but they had learned long ago to prepare for the worst. His fleet was positioned in a defensive formation, ready to either welcome new allies or destroy a potential threat. The space before them suddenly erupted in a brilliant flash of light. When the sensors cleared, Zethkari felt his blood run cold. Floating before them was a ship that defied everything he knew about starship design. It was massive, easily dwarfing his own flagship, but that wasn't what made him afraid. It was the ship's design that sent chills through his exoskeleton. Where Council ships were sleek and graceful, built for efficiency and beauty, this vessel looked like it had been designed by someone who understood only war. Its hull was dark, gray, almost black, with sharp angles that seemed to cut through space itself. Weapon emplacements dotted its surface like the spines of some predatory beast. It didn't just look dangerous, it looked hungry. "Dimensions?" he managed to ask. "Over 8 kilometers long, sir. Mass readings are." "Incredible. It's like they've somehow compressed the density of a small moon into that hull." The communication officer suddenly straightened at her station. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission audio only." "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was unlike anything in the Council's database. It was deep, resonant, and carried an undertone of controlled aggression that made every officer present step back from their stations. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Retribution. To whom am I speaking?" Zethkari composed himself quickly. First contact protocols were clear, even when the other party looked like they could reduce his fleet to debris. "This is Admiral Zethkari of the Galactic Council Fleet Eternal Vigilance. Welcome to Council space. I trust your journey was peaceful?" There was a pause that seemed to last forever. When the human spoke again, there was something cold in her voice that made the Admiral's secondary heart skip a beat. "Peaceful? Admiral, we didn't come here for peace. We came here for answers." "I don't understand. What answers do you seek?" 3 days ago, a Council ship calling itself the Star's Pride attacked one of our colony worlds. They destroyed our orbital platforms, bombarded our cities, and killed 40,000 civilians before our defense fleet could respond. When we tried to contact them, they claimed we were some kind of plague species that needed to be contained. The bridge fell silent. Zethkari's mind raced through the possibilities. The Star's Pride was a deep space explorer, not a warship. They had no authorization to attack anyone, let alone an unknown species. Unless… Captain Chen, I believe there has been a terrible misunderstanding. The Star's Pride was not acting under Council authority. We've been trying to locate them for weeks. Is that so? The human's voice carried a note of skepticism that made the Admiral nervous. Tell me, Admiral, how many of your ships have gone missing recently? The question hit like a physical blow. How could this human know about the missing ships? Several expeditions have failed to report in, yes. We assumed they had encountered some kind of natural phenomenon. Natural phenomenon? The human actually laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Admiral, your missing ships didn't encounter a phenomenon. They encountered us. And now they're part of our growing understanding of just how this galaxy really works. Warning alarms began to sound throughout the bridge as the human ship's weapon systems came online. The energy readings were staggering, far beyond anything the Council had ever developed. Captain Chen, I urge you to reconsider whatever action you're contemplating. We are not your enemies. Maybe not, came the reply. But you're part of a system that produces enemies like the ones who attacked our world. That makes you a problem we need to solve. Zethkari looked at his tactical display and felt his hope drain away. The human ship was alone, but its weapons were already locked onto his flagship. Worse, his sensors were detecting dozens more hyperspace signatures forming around them. The humans hadn't come alone after all. Admiral, his tactical officer whispered, I'm reading at least 30 more ships incoming. All of them the same configuration as the first. The Admiral closed his eyes. In 3 centuries of service, he had never faced odds like these. But the Galactic Council didn't surrender, even when facing the impossible. All ships, battle stations, prepare for combat. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as 2 civilizations prepared for a war that would reshape the galaxy forever. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the alien fleet scramble into defensive positions. Her brown eyes held no mercy as she studied the tactical display. 12 ships against 31. The aliens probably thought they still had a chance. They were wrong. Ma'am, the alien admiral is attempting to open another communication channel, reported Lieutenant Morrison from the communication station. Ignore it, Sarah replied without taking her eyes off the display. Commander Walsh, status report on the fleet. All ships reporting ready, Captain. The Vengeance, Reckoning, and Fury are moving to flank positions. Admiral Rodriguez confirms the second fleet is standing by in hyperspace. Sarah nodded. The plan was simple, elegant, and utterly devastating. 3 months of preparation had led to this moment. 3 months since the Galactic Council had made the mistake of attacking Earth. The official reports called it a first contact incident. The reality was far uglier. The alien ship Star's Pride had arrived in the Kepler 442 system and immediately opened fire on the colony world of New Geneva. No warning, no attempt at communication, just pure destruction. 40,000 people dead in the first hour, with another 100,000 injured or missing. What the aliens didn't know was that New Geneva wasn't just any colony. It was home to the families of Earth's Third Fleet. Military, families who had been evacuated there during the Centauri War. The children and spouses of humanity's finest warriors. The Council had killed the wrong people, Captain. I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from their lead ship, reported the science officer. It looks like they're trying to boost their shield harmonics. Let them try, Sarah said coldly. Have you finished analyzing their technology? Yes, ma'am. It's impressive by galactic standards, but it's all based on principles we mastered decades ago. Their weapons are high-energy plasma streams, effective but predictable. Their shields use a rotating frequency pattern that changes every few seconds. Sarah smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Predictable is good. What about their hulls? Standard duranium composite with some kind of crystalline matrix for reinforcement. Strong, but nothing our penetrator rounds can't handle. The captain turned to her weapons officer. Commander Harrison, I want you to target their lead ship's main reactor. 1 shot, center mass. Make it count. Aye, ma'am. Shall I use the standard projectiles? No, use the new ones. The ones with the antimatter cores. A hush fell over the bridge. The antimatter-tipped penetrator rounds were humanity's latest innovation in ship-to-ship combat. Each one carried enough destructive power to crack open a moon. They had never been used in actual combat. Today would be their debut. "Captain," the communications officer spoke up hesitantly. "The alien admiral is broadcasting on all frequencies. He's asking for a ceasefire to discuss terms." Sarah's expression didn't change. What terms could they possibly offer? Can they bring back the dead children of New Geneva? Can they undo 3 months of grief for families who lost everything? The bridge crew exchanged glances. They had all seen the footage from New Geneva. The orbital platforms falling like burning stars. The cities reduced to glass and ash. The desperate evacuation ships trying to escape the systematic bombardment. "Ma'am, we could at least hear what they have to say," suggested the executive officer. Sarah turned to look at him and he stepped back involuntarily. The captain's eyes held a coldness that seemed to leach the warmth from the air around her. "Commander Torres, my daughter was on New Geneva when they attacked. She was 7 years old. She was in her school when the plasma bombardment hit. Would you like to explain to me why I should show mercy to the species that killed her?" The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone on the bridge knew about the captain's loss, but she had never spoken of it directly before. The pain in her voice was like a physical presence, filling the air with a weight that made breathing difficult. "No, ma'am," Torres replied quietly. "I wouldn't." "Good. Then we understand each other." Sarah turned back to the tactical display. "All ships commence attack. Show them what happens when you make an enemy of humanity." The first salvo from the human fleet lit up space like a newborn star. 31 ships fired simultaneously, their weapon systems unleashing destruction that defied comprehension. The alien shields, impressive as they were, lasted approximately 3 seconds before collapsing under the assault. The alien admiral's flagship, the Eternal Vigilance, managed to return fire before the antimatter-tipped round struck its hull. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. "Direct hit on target Alpha," reported the weapons officer. "The ship is breaking apart." On the tactical display, the alien flagship simply ceased to exist. Where once there had been 2 kilometers of advanced warship, now there was only expanding debris and radiation. The remaining 11 alien ships tried to retreat, but the human fleet had anticipated this. The flanking ships had positioned themselves to cut off any escape routes. It wasn't a battle anymore. It was an execution. "Captain, we're receiving surrender signals from multiple alien vessels," the communications officer reported. "Denied," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Continue firing until there are no targets left." "Ma'am, the rules of warfare." "The rules of warfare went out the window when they decided to bomb civilians," Sarah snapped. "These people started a war with humanity. Today they learned the price of that decision." The slaughter continued for another 20 minutes. The alien ships designed for exploration and patrol duties were simply no match for humanity's war machines. Their weapons couldn't penetrate human shields, their armor couldn't stop human weapons, and their tactics were centuries out of date. When the last alien ship exploded, Sarah finally allowed herself to relax. The tactical display showed nothing but debris and radiation where the Galactic Council fleet had been. "Captain, we're detecting emergency beacons from some of the wreckage," the science officer reported. "There appear to be survivors." Sarah considered this for a moment. "Beam them aboard. Put them in the holding cells. I want to talk to them. All of them, ma'am. Every single one. I want them to understand exactly what they're dealing with. I want them to go back to their council and explain that humanity is not some primitive species they can push around." As the survivors were transported aboard, Sarah stared out at the debris field that had once been a proud fleet. This was just the beginning. The Galactic Council had thousands of ships, millions of worlds, and billions of citizens. Humanity had something better. The absolute certainty that they were right, and the technological superiority to make that certainty matter. "Commander Walsh, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them Phase 1 is complete. Request permission to begin Phase 2. "And what's Phase 2, Captain?" Sarah's smile was cold as winter on Pluto. "We're going to pay the Galactic Council a visit, starting with their homeworlds." The stars continued to hold their breath as humanity prepared to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. 3 weeks after the destruction of Admiral Zethkari's fleet, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session on the capital world of Nexus Prime. The Great Assembly Hall, built to accommodate representatives from over 1,000 species, had never felt so tense. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across the faces of beings who had thought themselves the masters of the galaxy. Chancellor Vorthak, the ancient Etherian who had led the council for over 2 centuries, floated above the central podium. His usually luminescent skin had dimmed to a sickly gray, and his telepathic emanations carried waves of barely controlled fear. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice amplified through the chamber's neural network. "We face a crisis unlike any in our recorded history. The species calling themselves humans has demonstrated capabilities that challenge everything we understand about galactic warfare." A murmur of unease rippled through the assembly. Holographic displays showed the debris field where the fleet had died, the energy signatures that defied current scientific understanding, and most disturbing of all, the recorded transmissions from the human captain. Ambassador Tisari of the Velnari Collective rose from her crystalline seat. Her people were renowned for their logical approach to problems, but even she seemed shaken. "Chancellor, our analysis of the engagement shows technology at least 3 centuries ahead of our current capabilities. How is this possible? Our exploration fleets have mapped this entire sector. There are no species capable of such advancement." "That is precisely the problem," replied the Chancellor. "These humans did not evolve here. Our xenobiologists believe they originated from a system on the very edge of our sensor range, in a region we deemed uninhabitable due to radiation from a nearby neutron star." General Korthax of the warrior clans slammed his armored fist on his console. The massive reptilian being's scarred hide bore testament to 1,000 battles. How they evolved is irrelevant. What matters is stopping them before they reach our core worlds. "My fleets stand ready to—" "Your fleets are dead, General," interrupted a new voice. Every head in the chamber turned as the massive blast doors opened to admit a small group of figures in environmental suits. The lead figure removed their helmet, revealing a human face with graying hair and eyes like chips of ice. "I am Admiral Marcus Rodriguez of the United Earth Fleet," the human announced calmly, "and I come bearing a message from my government." The chamber erupted in chaos. Security forces moved to surround the humans, but Chancellor Vorthak raised a glowing appendage for silence. "How did you get past our defenses?" Admiral Rodriguez smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The same way we got past General Korthax's 3rd and 7th battle groups. They were quite impressive, by the way. I particularly liked how the 3rd group tried to hide behind that asteroid field near Regulus 4. Creative thinking." General Korthax's face went pale beneath his scales. The 3rd and 7th groups represented nearly 200 ships, the pride of the warrior clans. "That's impossible. I would have received word if—" "You would have received word if anyone survived to send it," Rodriguez continued conversationally. "I'm afraid we were quite thorough, just like we were thorough with the mining facilities at Kepler 186, the trading posts in the Vega system, and the hidden shipyards at Wolf 359. The silence that followed was deafening. Those locations represented some of the Council's most strategically important assets, all supposedly protected by layers of security and defense fleets. Chancellor Vorthak's skin began to glow brighter as his stress levels increased. "What do you want?" "Justice," Rodriguez replied simply. 3 months ago, one of your ships attacked a human colony world. 40,000 civilians died, including children. We want the persons responsible delivered to us for trial." Ambassador Tisari stood again, her crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights. The Star's Pride was acting without authorization. Captain Neltharin was pursuing what he believed to be a biological threat based on corrupted sensor data. It was a tragic mistake. A mistake? Rodriguez's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried throughout the vast chamber. "Ambassador, let me show you what your mistake looked like." The Admiral activated a holographic projector, and suddenly the chamber was filled with images from New Geneva. Burning cities, desperate evacuation efforts, and worst of all, the faces of the dead. Children, families, entire communities reduced to ash and memory. "My daughter lived there," Rodriguez said quietly as the images played. "She was 8 years old. She wanted to be a xenobiologist when she grew up. She was fascinated by the idea of meeting other species among the stars." The images shifted to show the aftermath. Mass graves, memorial services, and the hollow-eyed stares of survivors who had lost everything. "Captain Neltharin called us a plague species. He said we needed to be contained before we could spread. Tell me, honored representatives, do these look like the faces of a plague to you? Several of the alien delegates looked away from the holographic display. Others seemed transfixed by the human capacity for emotion, something many species in the Council had lost over their long evolution. Admiral, Chancellor Vorthak said carefully, Captain Neltherin is dead. His ship was destroyed by our own forces when we discovered his unauthorized actions. We cannot deliver what no longer exists. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Yes, we know about that. We also know that the order to attack came from someone higher up the chain of command, someone who decided that humanity needed to be eliminated before we could become a threat. The chamber fell silent again. This was information that should have been impossible for the humans to obtain. It was buried in the deepest classified files of the Council's intelligence services. We want Director Velnoth of the Threat Assessment Division, Rodriguez continued. We want the tactical planners who chose the targets, and we want the politicians who authorized the strike. You have 72 hours to deliver them to the coordinates we're transmitting. General Korthax finally found his voice. And if we refuse? Rodriguez turned to look at the general with the expression of a teacher explaining something to a particularly slow student. General, in the past 3 weeks we have eliminated 17 of your fleets, destroyed 4 major shipyards, and neutralized your early warning network in 6 star systems. We have done this while revealing perhaps 10% of our actual military capabilities. The Admiral paused to let that sink in. If you refuse, we will demonstrate what the other 90% can do. Starting with this world. Ambassador Tassari's crystalline form began to resonate with harmonic frequencies that indicated extreme agitation. You cannot be serious. Nexus Prime is home to 20 billion sentient beings from across the galaxy. New Geneva was home to 2 million humans. Rodriguez replied coldly. We seem to value life differently than you do. Chancellor Vorthak floated higher above the podium, his skin now pulsing with rapid flashes of light. Admiral, surely we can reach some kind of accommodation. The Council is prepared to offer substantial reparations. Reparations? Rodriguez laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. Chancellor, you can't buy your way out of genocide. You can't negotiate away the lives of 40,000 innocent people. What you can do is deliver the people responsible for their deaths, or face the consequences of protecting war criminals. The human admiral turned to survey the assembled representatives, his gaze stopping briefly on each major delegation. Ladies, gentlemen, and entities of various descriptions, let me be crystal clear about humanity's position. We didn't ask to be part of your galactic community. We were perfectly happy developing on our own, exploring space at our own pace, building our own future. But you forced us to notice you. You made yourselves our problem. And now you're going to learn something that every species in our galaxy learned the hard way. When you make an enemy of humanity, you don't just fight our military. You fight our entire civilization. Every man, woman, and child becomes a weapon pointed at your heart. Rodriguez moved toward the exit, his escorts falling in behind him. 72 hours, Chancellor. Choose wisely. As the blast doors closed behind the humans, the chamber remained silent for long minutes. Finally, General Korthax spoke the words that everyone was thinking. What have we awakened? Outside in the cold vacuum of space, a human fleet of unprecedented size waited in perfect formation, their weapons trained on the world below. They had given the galaxy a choice. The galaxy had never faced a choice quite like this one before. 68 hours after Admiral Rodriguez's ultimatum, Director Velnoth sat in the highest security detention facility on Nexus Prime, staring at the energy bars that contained him. The Kethmoran's tentacles writhed with barely controlled fury as he contemplated how quickly his carefully laid plans had collapsed. For decades, he had served as the Council's Director of Threat Assessment, identifying potential dangers to galactic stability before they could grow into existential problems. His methods were sometimes harsh, but they had kept the peace for over a century. The humans should have been just another successful intervention. Instead, they had become his greatest failure. The cell's communication system activated, and Chancellor Vorthak's voice filled the small space. Director, the Council has reached a decision regarding the human demands. Let me guess, Velnoth replied bitterly. You're going to hand me over to save yourselves. The vote was close, the Chancellor admitted. But yes, you, along with the tactical planners and authorization committee members, will be transferred to human custody within the hour. Velnoth's tentacles stopped writhing. You fool. Do you really think giving them what they want will end this? I've read the intelligence reports from our surviving agents. The humans aren't just angry about New Geneva. They're studying us, learning our weaknesses, mapping our infrastructure. Director, your paranoia led us to this crisis in the first place. Paranoia? Velnoth rose from his resting position, his bioluminescent patches flaring bright orange with agitation. Chancellor, I've spent 3 months analyzing everything we know about these humans. Do you want to know what I discovered? The Chancellor's reply carried a note of reluctant curiosity. Tell me. They're not just technologically superior, they're strategically perfect. Every action they've taken has served multiple purposes. The fleet destroyers demonstrated their military capabilities while gathering intelligence on our ship designs. The infrastructure attacks degraded our ability to respond while testing our defensive coordination. Even this ultimatum serves to divide our political unity while forcing us to reveal our decision-making processes. Velnoth moved to the energy barrier, his reflection distorted by the crackling field. Chancellor, these humans have been planning this war since before they made first contact. The attack on New Geneva wasn't the beginning of their aggression. It was the excuse they needed to begin what they had already decided to do. That's impossible. Our first contact protocols were designed to work with species that had evolved within our galaxy, Velnoth interrupted. Species that understood the rules of interstellar diplomacy. These humans come from outside our sphere of influence. They have no respect for our traditions, our laws, or our assumptions about how civilized beings should behave. The director turned away from the barrier, his tentacles now moving in the slow, hypnotic patterns that indicated deep thought. I've been analyzing their ship configurations, their weapon systems, their tactical doctrines. Chancellor, they didn't develop this technology in response to our attack. Some of these innovations are clearly decades old. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that humanity has been preparing for interstellar warfare for much longer than we realized. The question is, who were they originally planning to fight? Before the Chancellor could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Emergency lighting bathed the corridor in harsh red illumination, as automated voices announced an imminent evacuation order. Chancellor, what's happening? Velnoth called out. The reply came not from Chancellor Vorthak, but from a human voice he didn't recognize. Director Velnoth, this is Captain Chen of the UES Retribution. We've come to collect you. The energy barrier of his cell flickered and died. Through the now open doorway, Velnoth could see human soldiers in powered armor moving through the facility with terrifying efficiency. They weren't just rescuing prisoners. They were systematically disabling every security system, copying every database and mapping every corridor. How did you penetrate our defenses? Velnoth asked as a human soldier gestured for him to follow. We didn't penetrate them, Captain Chen's voice replied through the facility's speakers. We bypassed them entirely. Your shields, weapons, and sensors are all designed to detect conventional attacks. We're not conventional. As they moved through the facility, Velnoth caught glimpses of what the humans meant. Their soldiers moved through solid walls as if they didn't exist. Their equipment operated on principles that made no scientific sense, and their coordination was perfect to a degree that suggested some kind of collective consciousness. Director, came another voice, this one belonging to Admiral Rodriguez. I believe you have something that belongs to us. They emerged into a large chamber where the Admiral stood waiting, flanked by an honor guard of human Marines. Behind him, holographic displays showed the tactical situation around Nexus Prime. The Council's defensive fleets were positioned in perfect formation, ready to repel any conventional attack. They were also completely surrounded by human ships that hadn't been there moments before. How many ships do you have? Velnoth asked, his tentacles betraying his fear. Enough, Rodriguez replied simply. Director, you authorized the attack on New Geneva based on your assessment that humanity represented an existential threat to the Galactic Council. I'm curious about your reasoning. Velnoth straightened to his full height, his dignity intact despite his circumstances. Your species exhibits several characteristics we've learned to associate with galactic-level threats. Rapid technological advancement, aggressive expansion patterns, and most concerning of all, your apparent inability to coexist peacefully with other intelligent species. Other species? Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Director, you do realize that humans had never encountered another intelligent species before we met you? That's exactly my point, Velnoth replied. Admiral, in our databases we have records of over 1,200 species that achieved interstellar travel. Of those, exactly 3 have never coexisted with another intelligent species on their homeworld. All 3 became galaxy-spanning threats that required massive military interventions to contain. The Admiral nodded slowly. I see. So you decided to eliminate us before we could become a problem. It was the logical choice, based on historical precedent. Historical precedent. Rodriguez repeated the words, as if tasting something unpleasant. Director, let me tell you about human historical precedent. We've spent the last 5,000 years learning how to wage war against enemies that were faster, stronger, and more numerous than us. We learned to use our intelligence, our adaptability, and our absolute refusal to give up. The Admiral gestured to the holographic displays. You see those ships surrounding your fleets? Each one represents a different approach to solving the problem you represent. We have kinetic kill vehicles that can crack planets, dimensional weapons that can erase matter from existence, and biological agents that can rewrite genetic codes in real time. Velnoth's bioluminescent patches began flashing in rapid patterns of orange and red. You're bluffing. No species could develop such weapons without our intelligence networks detecting them. Director, you made the mistake of assuming we were like you. You assumed we would follow your rules, respect your boundaries, and play by your understanding of how the galaxy works. Rodriguez smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We're not like you. We never have been. And that's exactly why you were right to fear us. The Admiral turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Director? You were correct about one thing. We are an existential threat to the Galactic Council. We just disagree about who the real threat is. As the human forces prepared to depart with their prisoners, Velnoth caught a glimpse of one final holographic display. It showed the current position of human forces throughout Council space, and his tentacles went completely still with shock. They were everywhere. Thousands of ships in hundreds of systems, all moving with the coordinated precision of a single vast organism. This wasn't an invasion fleet. It was a complete military occupation that had somehow been deployed without anyone noticing. How long? He whispered. Captain Chen's voice answered him one final time. Director, we've been here for 6 months. We've been watching, learning, and preparing. The attack on New Geneva didn't start this war. It just gave us permission to finish it. As the human ships vanished into hyperspace, taking their prisoners with them, the Galactic Council finally began to understand the true scope of what they faced. Humanity hadn't just declared war on them. Humanity had already won. The trial of Director Velnoth and his co-conspirators took place aboard the UES Justice, humanity's newest and most advanced tribunal ship. Built specifically for this purpose, the vessel contained courtrooms designed to accommodate multiple species, while ensuring perfect translation and environmental controls for all participants. Judge Amanda Harrison, formerly of the International Criminal Court on Earth, presided over proceedings that were broadcast live throughout both human and council space. Her weathered face showed the weight of 40 years dispensing justice, but her eyes remained sharp as she called the court to order. This tribunal has been convened, she announced, to determine the guilt or innocence of the defendants in the matter of crimes against humanity, specifically the unprovoked attack on the civilian population of New Geneva. Director Velnoth sat in the defendant's booth, his tentacles coiled in the formal posture of Kethmaran dignity. Beside him, the other members of the conspiracy maintained their own species' equivalent of composure. They had expected execution or worse. A trial according to legal procedures was something none of them had anticipated. Your Honor, said the lead defense counsel, a human lawyer named David Kim, who had volunteered to represent the aliens. My clients maintain that their actions, while tragic in their consequences, were taken in good faith based on intelligence assessments that suggested humanity posed an existential threat to galactic civilization. Prosecutor Sarah Mitchell, whose own sister had died on New Geneva, rose to address the court. Your Honor, the prosecution will show that the defendant's actions constituted not a preemptive defense, but rather a deliberate act of genocide based on racist assumptions and flawed intelligence. The first week of testimony established the timeline of events. Council intelligence operatives had been observing human space for over 2 years before the attack, using stealth probes that humanity had deliberately allowed to operate undetected. The recordings they gathered painted a picture of the aggressive, militaristic species constantly engaged in conflicts with itself and its environment. What the surveillance failed to capture, explained Dr. Elizabeth Warren, humanity's chief xenosociologist, was the context of human behavior. Yes, we engage in conflicts, but we also engage in cooperation, art, science, and philosophy. The Council's operatives were specifically looking for evidence of aggression, so that's what they found. Director Velnoth's defense centered on his long record of successful threat assessments. Over 30 species had been subjected to preventive interventions during his tenure, and galactic peace had been maintained. His methods were harsh but effective. The director saved countless lives, argued Kim during his opening statement. The Vorthan Collective alone had the capability to destroy dozens of worlds before the Council intervened. The crystalline hives had already begun converting entire solar systems to support their reproduction cycles. Director Velnoth's actions prevented galaxy-wide catastrophes, but the prosecution had evidence that changed everything. Your Honor, Prosecutor Mitchell announced on the trial's 8th day, we call as our next witness someone who is present at the highest levels of council. Decision-making during the planning of the New Geneva attack. The courtroom fell silent as a figure in a concealing robe entered the witness area. When the hood was lowered, gasps echoed from the gallery. It was former Chancellor Kethmos, Vorthak's predecessor, who had supposedly died in a transport accident 3 years earlier. Chancellor, Mitchell began, please tell the court how you came to be here. The ancient Etherian's voice carried the weight of centuries. I was not killed in an accident. I was eliminated because I opposed the human intervention plan. Director Velnoth arranged my assassination when I refused to authorize the attack. The revelation sent shockwaves through both human and council space. Director Velnoth had not only authorized genocide, he had committed murder to ensure it happened. The director, Kethmos continued, believed that any species capable of achieving interstellar travel, without first encountering other intelligences, would inevitably become expansionist and aggressive. His plan was not to contain humanity, but to eliminate it entirely before it could spread beyond its local systems. Under cross-examination, the former chancellor revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. The attack on New Geneva was intended to be the first strike in a systematic campaign to destroy all human colonies and infrastructure. The goal was complete extinction. We saved the chancellor's neural patterns before his supposed death, explained Admiral Rodriguez during a recess. It took our best scientists 3 years to reconstruct a stable form for him to inhabit, but we felt the truth needed to be heard. The defense struggled to counter this testimony. Kim argued that even if Velnoth had planned genocide, his assessment of human danger might still have been correct. Your Honor, the evidence suggests that humanity did indeed pose the threat the director believed it did. In the months since New Geneva, human forces have demonstrated capabilities that exceed anything in our databases. Perhaps his methods were wrong, but his conclusions may have been accurate. It was Judge Harrison who posed the critical question. Mr. Kim, are you arguing that genocide can be justified by hypothetical future threats? No, Your Honor. I'm arguing that my client genuinely believed he was preventing a greater genocide by authorizing a smaller one. The prosecution's final witness was Captain Sarah Chen herself. Still bearing the emotional scars of losing her daughter, she took the stand with a dignity that impressed even the defense. Captain, Mitchell asked, in your opinion, would humanity have become the threat Director Velnoth believed we were? Chen considered the question carefully. No. Before New Geneva, humanity's expansion was slow and careful. We established colonies, yes, but we also spent decades studying each system to ensure we didn't disrupt existing ecosystems. We had protocols for first contact situations that emphasized peaceful coexistence. And after New Geneva, we became exactly what they feared we were, Chen replied quietly. Not because it was our nature, but because they forced us to become it to survive. The prosecutor leaned forward. Captain, if the council were to guarantee that no further attacks would be made on human civilians, would humanity be willing to return to its pre-war expansion policies? For the first time during her testimony, Chen smiled. Ms. Mitchell, that's not really up to me to decide. But I can tell you that humans are remarkably good at adapting to new situations. If the galaxy wants to coexist peacefully, we can learn to do that. If it wants to fight, we've proven we can do that too. The trial's most dramatic moment came when Director Velnoth himself took the stand. Under oath, he admitted to ordering the attack, arranging the assassination of Chancellor Kethmos, and planning the systematic extermination of humanity. "I have no regrets," he stated flatly. "Everything I did was necessary to preserve galactic civilization. If I could do it again, I would make the same choices." "Even knowing what you know now about human capabilities?" asked the prosecutor. "Especially knowing what I know now," Velnoth replied. "You have proven that every fear I had about your species was justified. You are a threat to everything we have built." Judge Harrison's verdict, delivered after 3 days of deliberation, was broadcast simultaneously to over 10,000 worlds. "The defendants are guilty of crimes against humanity," she announced. "However, this court recognizes that they acted according to their understanding of galactic law and their duty to protect their civilization. Therefore, this court sentences them not to death, but to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after they have served a minimum of 50 Earth years." The sentence sent a clear message to both sides. Humanity valued justice over vengeance, but it would not tolerate attacks on its civilians. In the aftermath of the trial, something unexpected happened. Representatives from dozens of council species began requesting formal diplomatic contact with Earth. They had watched the proceedings and seen something they hadn't expected: a species capable of terrible war but also capable of remarkable mercy. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was full of surprises. 6 months after the trial, Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood before the newly constructed Galactic Assembly on the neutral world of Haven, humanity's first formal diplomatic facility in council space. The building itself was a masterpiece of cooperative engineering, with sections designed to accommodate the environmental needs of over 300 different species. Today marked humanity's formal admission to the Galactic Council. But the ceremony was unlike any in the organization's history. Instead of a single species joining an established order, the entire structure of galactic governance was being rebuilt from the ground up. "Honored delegates," Elena began, her words translated simultaneously into hundreds of languages and communication methods. "6 months ago, our species met under the worst possible circumstances. Today we gather to build something unprecedented, a truly inclusive galactic civilization." The assembly hall buzzed with the conversations of beings who had never expected to sit as equals. The proud Thrakari military caste shared seating sections with the pacifist Velnari philosophers. The hive-minded crystalline collectives coordinated their responses with the fiercely individualistic Korthax clans, and watching over it all, human diplomatic staff ensured that every voice could be heard and understood. Chancellor Vorthak, now serving as interim leader of the transition government, floated to his designated speaking position. His bioluminescent skin had returned to its normal healthy glow, though he still carried the weight of recent events in his posture. "Ambassador Vasquez speaks truly," he said. "What we build here today represents not just the admission of humanity to our council, but the transformation of that council into something far greater than what it was." The changes had been dramatic. The old council had been dominated by a handful of elder species who had achieved interstellar travel first and claimed the right to guide younger civilizations. The new assembly operated on principles of technological and cultural exchange, with representation based on contribution rather than seniority. The Human Integration Accords, Elena continued, establish several fundamental principles that will guide our cooperation. First, no species shall be subjected to preventive intervention without clear evidence of aggressive intent and a formal trial before this assembly. Second, all species have the right to develop their technology and expand their territory as long as they respect the similar rights of others. Third, disputes between species shall be resolved through mediation, arbitration, or if necessary, limited conflict under strictly regulated conditions. The fourth principle was the most revolutionary: mandatory technology sharing. Every species in the new alliance was required to contribute their unique innovations to a common database accessible to all members. The humans had led by example, sharing everything from their antimatter technology to their advanced AI systems. The results, explained Dr. James Patterson, humanity's chief science liaison, have exceeded our most optimistic projections. By combining human computational methods with Velnari crystalline matrices and Thrakari exotic matter manipulation, We've achieved breakthrough in energy generation that will benefit everyone. The demonstration that followed left the assembly speechless. A small device no larger than a human hand generated enough clean energy to power a starship for months. The technology drew on principles from 6 different species, merged in ways that none of them could have achieved alone. But not everyone was pleased with the new arrangements. "This is an abomination," declared War Chief Gorthak of the traditional faction, his massive frame dominating his speaking platform. "For millennia, the strong have led and the weak have followed. This new system rewards the clever and the innovative while diminishing the role of proven warriors." Elena had expected this objection. The traditional faction represented species that had built their civilizations on conquest and dominance. They saw the new cooperative model as a threat to their way of life. "War Chief," she replied diplomatically, "the new system doesn't diminish anyone. It simply offers more ways to contribute to galactic civilization. Your people's military expertise is still valued. We need skilled warriors to defend against external threats and maintain peace between member species." "External threats?" Gorthak's laugh was like grinding stone. "Ambassador, you humans are the external threat. You appeared from nowhere, destroyed our fleets, and now you claim to lead us toward peace. How do we know this isn't simply a more sophisticated form of conquest?" The question had been raised before, and Elena had prepared for it. She activated a holographic display that showed current human military deployments throughout the galaxy. "War Chief, these displays show the location of every human military vessel, installation, and outpost in what was formerly Council space. As you can see, our forces are withdrawing to defensive positions around human colonies and strategic cooperation points. We're not conquering your territory. We're offering to help you improve it." The data was verified by independent monitors from a dozen species. Humanity's fleet, which had seemed omnipresent during the conflict, was indeed consolidating into a much smaller footprint. "But why?" asked Ambassador Tassari, her crystalline form reflecting the assembly hall's lights. "Ambassador Vasquez, your species demonstrated overwhelming military superiority. You could have simply imposed your will on all of us. Instead, you're offering us partnership. What do you gain from this arrangement?" Helena smiled, and for the first time since the proceedings began, it was completely genuine. "Ambassador Tassari, that question reveals a fundamental difference between human and traditional galactic thinking. You assume that interaction between species must involve dominance and submission. We prefer cooperation and mutual benefit." She gestured to the assembled delegates. "Look around this hall. Each species here has unique capabilities that humanity lacks. The Velnari understand crystalline computing in ways we never could. The Etherians manipulate energy fields that we can barely detect. The Korthaks have metallurgy techniques that our best scientists are still trying to comprehend. Working together, we can achieve things that none of us could accomplish alone. Yes, we could have conquered you all, but then we would have been stuck with the administrative nightmare of managing hundreds of unwilling subject species while missing out on the incredible innovations that come from voluntary cooperation." The assembly fell silent as delegates considered her words. Finally, an unexpected voice spoke up from the observer section. "The human speaks truth." All heads turned to see former Chancellor Kethmos, now restored to a modified Etherian body that glowed with soft silver light. His presence at the assembly had been controversial, but Elena had insisted that his perspective was necessary. "I have had months to observe human behavior," the ancient being continued. "Their actions consistently match their stated intentions. When they say they want cooperation, they mean cooperation. When they say they want peace, they mean peace. And when they say they will defend themselves, they mean that too." Kethmos floated higher, addressing the entire assembly. "Honored colleagues, I spent centuries believing that galactic peace required strong central authority and preventive intervention against potential threats. I was wrong. True peace requires trust, respect, and the willingness to work together toward common goals." The vote for humanity's admission to the reorganized Galactic Alliance was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. 317 species voted in favor, with only 43 opposed and 12 abstentions. As the ceremony concluded, Elena found herself approached by a delegation of younger species that had been minor members of the old council. "Ambassador," said their spokesperson, a feathered being from the Airy Collective, "our species have watched these proceedings with great interest. For too long we were told that our ideas were too radical, our technologies too dangerous. Our social structure's too unstable. Will the new alliance be different? Elena looked at the eager faces surrounding her and remembered her own daughter, who had dreamed of exploring the stars and meeting alien civilizations. These beings had that same look of wonder and possibility. I can't promise it will be easy, she said honestly. Building a truly cooperative galactic civilization will require work, compromise, and patience from all of us. But yes, it will be different. Everyone who wants to contribute will have a voice. Everyone who respects the rights of others will have a place. As the delegates dispersed to begin the long work of building their new alliance, Elena stood alone in the great hall for a moment. Through the transparent walls, she could see the stars that had once seemed so distant and hostile. Now they represented possibilities that no single species could have imagined. Humanity had come to the stars seeking knowledge and wonder. They had found conflict and tragedy instead. But from that tragedy, they had built something new and unprecedented. A galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than domination. The stars no longer held their breath. They sang with the voices of hundreds of species working together toward a future none of them could achieve alone. 5 years after the formation of the Galactic Alliance, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the research station New Horizon, watching as construction crews put the finishing touches on humanity's most ambitious project yet. The massive structure floating in space before her would have been impossible to build by any single species. But the combined knowledge and resources of the Alliance had made it reality. The Void Gate stretched nearly 50 kilometers across, its crystalline framework humming with energies that bent spacetime itself. When activated, it would open a stable wormhole to the Andromeda Galaxy, making humanity the first species in recorded history to achieve intergalactic travel. Amazing, isn't it? Said a familiar voice behind her. Sarah turned to see Admiral Rodriguez, now serving as Director of Alliance Defense, approaching with his characteristic measured stride. Marcus, she said warmly, embracing her old friend. I didn't expect to see you here for the test run. Wouldn't miss it, he replied, his eyes fixed on the gate. Besides, someone needs to make sure our new neighbors in Andromeda get the right first impression of us. Sarah laughed, but there was a note of concern in it. Nervous about what we might find out there? Not nervous, Rodriguez said thoughtfully. Cautious. We've learned a lot about the galaxy in the past 5 years, and not all of it has been pleasant. He was referring to the discovery of the Devourers, an ancient machine intelligence that had been systematically consuming star systems on the galactic rim for millions of years. The Alliance's first major military action had been a coordinated effort to stop their advance, using combined human, Thrakari, and Korthax fleets supported by Velnari computational warfare and Etherian energy manipulation. The battle had been brutal, but successful. More importantly, it had proven that the Alliance could function as a unified military force when necessary. Any word from the advanced scouts? Sarah asked. They report stable conditions on the far side, Rodriguez replied. The target galaxy appears to have multiple intelligent species, but no obvious signs of large-scale conflict. Could be our kind of place. Through the observation deck's speakers, the voice of Project Director Tisari echoed as she conducted the final systems check. The Velnari scientist had volunteered to oversee the project despite the risks, believing that intergalactic exploration represented the ultimate test of Alliance cooperation. All stations report ready, Tisari announced. Beginning power build-up sequence. The Void Gate began to glow as energy flowed through its crystalline matrix. The space within its ring shimmered and distorted as gravitational fields strengthened to impossible levels. This was technology that pushed the boundaries of what even the Alliance understood about physics. You know, Sarah said quietly, 5 years ago I was ready to burn down the galaxy for what happened to Emma. Now look at us. We're opening doorways to other galaxies. Rodriguez nodded slowly. People change. Circumstances change. The question is whether we're changing for the better. Initiating spatial distortion field. Tisari's voice continued over the speakers. Reality anchor point stable. Beginning dimensional breach. The space within the gate suddenly turned black, then erupted in a display of colors that had no names in any language. When the light faded, a perfect circle of darkness hung in the center of the ring, showing star patterns that no being in their galaxy had ever seen. Portal stabilized, Tisari announced with barely controlled excitement. We have achieved stable intergalactic transit. The way to Andromeda is open. The observation deck fell silent as everyone present contemplated the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. Humanity had gone from a single-planet species to intergalactic explorers in less than a century. The first ships through will be diplomatic vessels, Rodriguez explained. 3 human ships, 3 alliance ships, and 3 joint crew vessels. We want to make it clear that we come as a unified civilization, not as conquerors. What if we find hostile species on the other side? Sarah asked. Then we'll deal with them the same way we dealt with the Devourers, Rodriguez replied firmly. The Alliance has proven that we're stronger together than any of us were apart. If Andromeda wants war, they'll get a fight they're not prepared for. If they want peace, they'll find partners unlike anything they've ever encountered. The first ship to enter the portal was the UES Diplomacy, a vessel designed specifically for first contact situations. Its crew included representatives from 12 different Alliance species, all trained in xenopsychology and conflict resolution. Behind it followed the Thrakari ship Honor's Edge and the Velnari vessel Crystal Harmony. Transit successful, came the report from Diplomacy's captain. We're reading multiple star systems with clear signs of technological civilizations. Transmitting preliminary sensor data now. The data that flowed back through the portal showed something remarkable. Andromeda contained hundreds of species that had apparently learned to coexist peacefully, organized into loose confederations based on mutual cooperation rather than central authority. It was everything the Galactic Alliance aspired to become, but on an even grander scale. They're trying to communicate with us, reported the communications officer aboard Diplomacy. Multiple frequencies, various mathematical and scientific concepts. They seem curious rather than hostile. Over the following hours, a picture emerged of Andromeda's inhabitants. They had achieved intergalactic civilization through principles remarkably similar to those the Alliance had developed: technological sharing, mutual respect, and cooperative exploration. They had been watching the Milky Way for millennia, waiting for its inhabitants to develop sufficient maturity for contact. In other words, Tassari explained during the debrief, they've been waiting for us to grow up. The formal first contact ceremony took place 3 days later, with representatives from both galaxies meeting at a specially constructed, neutral station positioned halfway between the Void Gate and Andromeda's nearest outpost. Sarah found herself selected as part of the human delegation, despite her protests that she was a researcher, not a diplomat. You represent something important, Elena Vasquez had explained. You show that humans can move past grief and anger to build something better. The Andromedan representatives were unlike anything in either galaxy's databases. The primary delegate was a being of living light that called itself Harmony of Stars, while its companions included a collective consciousness housed in a mobile crystal matrix and something that appeared to be a sentient equation that existed purely as organized information. We welcome you, children of the spiral arm. Harmony of Stars communicated through modulated gravitational waves. We have watched your growth with great interest. Your capacity for both destruction and creation is remarkable. Elena, serving as humanity's chief diplomat, responded carefully. We thank you for your welcome. We come seeking knowledge, friendship, and the chance to contribute to the greater community of intelligent life. Your species, the Crystalline Collective noted, has achieved in decades what most take millennia to accomplish. You learn to transform conflict into cooperation, fear into curiosity, and isolation into alliance. This suggests great potential. The negotiations that followed established the framework for ongoing contact between the two galaxies. Technology would be shared gradually, with safeguards to prevent either side from being overwhelmed by the other's capabilities. Cultural exchange programs would be established. Most importantly, both galaxies would work together to prepare for what the Andromedans called the Greater Challenge. There are intelligences in the void between galaxies. Harmony of Stars explained during a private meeting with the human delegation. Ancient things that view organic life as a temporary inconvenience. They have destroyed entire galactic clusters, consuming the energy of billions of civilizations. They are coming here. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature control. How long do we have? In your terms, perhaps 50,000 years. In cosmic terms, the blink of an eye. We must prepare, and we must be ready to stand together when they arrive. Rodriguez leaned forward in his chair. What do these entities want? Energy, life force. The spark of consciousness itself. They are entropy given form, seeking to return the universe to cold, dark silence. The meeting continued for hours, establishing the groundwork for what would become the greatest cooperative effort in the history of either galaxy. Humanity would contribute its talent for rapid innovation and adaptive warfare. The Alliance would provide diverse technologies and perspectives. Andromeda would share its ancient wisdom and vast resources. As the delegation prepared to return home, Sarah stood once more at an observation window, this time looking out at the alien stars of Andromeda. Somewhere among those distant suns were civilizations older than her entire galaxy, beings who had overcome challenges that the Alliance was only beginning to face. Scared? Rodriguez asked, joining her at the window. Terrified, Sarah admitted, but also excited. We're not alone anymore, Marcus. We're part of something bigger than we ever imagined. Think we're ready for what's coming? Sarah thought about Emma, about the journey that had brought humanity from a single world Tazani